spirit as well. I hope that you have enjoyed some really good meals. You have spent some quality time with your loved ones, honey, and just doing all the things that just make you feel, ooey and gooey in your spirit. Today we have another incredible soul who I have followed and been in community with and learned from. For a number of years. I mean, it might be a decade, but we'll get into it in a minute. But before we do that, I just want to make sure that you know I am Craig Aaron Martin, educator, advocate, and curator of Courageous Conversations. This space is for those who refuse to shrink. Um, and I hope that you enjoy this sweet cup of courage today. Let's go ahead and brave it together. So, today's guest is the kind of soul that doesn't just do the work, he embodies it. Dr. Phil Eccles is a radiant force, part scholar, part storyteller, part spirit guide for those of us trying to lead with love and systems that too often forget people matter most. He's a father and a husband, a facilitator, a fierce champion for what's possible when we slow down, listen deeply, and lead with care. From classrooms to boardrooms, Phil's journey has spanned school districts, hospital systems, always rooted in the belief that every human being is worthy of grace, growth, and belonging. Now he does all kinds of wonderful training things. He's working all these wonderful collaboratives. He's actually an adaptive schools master. He's currently doing some big work in organizational development and diversity specialist at Wake Med Health and Hospitals in North Carolina. I believe I said that right. And if I didn't, he gonna let us know in a minute. All good, all good. But more than that, and more than the titles and accolades, I can say this. I can attest this 10 toes down. Phil is one of those rare leaders who makes you feel seen, safe, and stretched all at once. He knows that collaboration without care is empty and that change without community won't ever last. Phil, welcome to Brave Voices in Education. How's your heart, my brother and friend?
It is full with that warm introduction and welcome. But yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to share. Just appreciate being connected with you and just grateful for this opportunity. Thank you.
Well, I think we connected courtesy of ASCD. I want
Mhm.
to say that we may have connected. I want to say Tennessee, but I could be wrong. It might have been Boston, because I know it's ASCD because we've definitely been connected through that time. And one of the things that I love and adore is that your heart makes room for folks even if they don't know you, and like it, you have this incredible smile and this warmth and grace that you walk in, that when I walked into it, I'm like, "Ah, this dude here is something." There might have been a little jealousy because I'm like, he real southern, he more so. I felt like I gave my southernness up in Boston for a hot minute, but then I was in your space and I just felt like, okay, I just need to bring him some iced tea and just sit down and just let's go. But I
Ooh,
believe we also had an opportunity to be in community, ASCD Emerging Leaders, ASCD
yeah.
work, and I have just continued to be such a fan and such a huge, huge. I feel like I've gotten micro mentoring from you because the way you have us think about the human condition in systems work, you do it with such grace and such strategic storytelling that it always has us like really pause and say, huh, how am I spoken this wheel? And I just am curious, like, where do you find, like, I can't be the only person who shared this, but I'm curious, like, what births that wonderful spirit that you walk with as you just move from place to place and moment by moment.
I will share where we first connected. I want to go back to that. It was Tennessee, and it was with ASCD. And I remember it was you, me, and Basil. I feel like we all had on like blue suits. It was like the Blue Suit Brother Coalition. Like all of us were connected. But that was when that was the first time we connected, first of many.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, your story, just as I reflect on, um, who I am and how I am. it goes back to my parents. That's where I would say that a lot of who I am started.
Mhm.
Was my mother was a first grade teacher of 30 plus years. My father was a pastor of 40 plus years at the same church. And so it's similar to, in Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Outliers, he talks about, at 10,000 hours and how, people are raised in homes like Tiger Woods. His father was a golf professional, like Kobe Bryant's father played basketball overseas. So it's almost like being raised with people who are mentors where you watch it. And I just remember seeing like teaching, grace,
Mhm.
presence, like listening, all of that just with my parents at an early age. Just every Sunday I was in church listening to my father speak and share stories and in a biblical sense and from his past experiences. My mother, I saw her tutoring and taking her time with students, not just in her classrooms but in the community, and that really did shape like who I was and how I am present day. We talk about in school systems and with children, um, students and children soak up things from people they admire like sponges. And so, just given my relationship with my parents and how I saw people respond to them and how they treated me in balanced life and family and work and grace and compassion, that really shapes who I am and a lot of my storytelling and service that I provide today.
Mm. I appreciate that, especially just also thinking about the architecture of your journey being your parents who laid the groundswell for you to be who you are. I would love to just lean in a little bit more about like when did you know that education in some shape or form was going to be part of your calling?
Mm. When I was in college, undergrad, I at first I didn't know what my path was and what I was going to do. My mother did not want me to be an educator. She wanted me to be an architect or an engineer, something outside of education.
Mm-hmm.
And we're always called to do what we are meant to do. And I remember becoming a psychology major in undergrad and still not sure exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew it would be something where I was listening and supporting people where they were. I didn't know if it would be counseling or therapy or coaching or teaching, whether that be in the classroom or as an administrator. But I said the path begins with teaching, with being in the classroom, and so I ended up moving back to my hometown. I taught for 2 years, and then I went back and got my master's in counselor education. And
Mm-hmm.
so I knew at an early age that listening and supporting people, I was always one of those people where people felt safe enough to come to for advice.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew that that was a strength or a gift or a calling of mine, was just listening, being a safe space, a non-judgmental space for friends, for peers, for colleagues. And that led me into school counseling. And so I was a school counselor for 11 years, and I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do from there. But I worked so closely with administrators, I knew I wanted a leadership position in the sense of impacting more students through leadership. And that's when I moved into professional learning because I realized that it's not the students, right? It's the adults. If we could get the
Ooh.
adults to act right, if we could get the adults
Well,
to shift their mindset and um, be the model and be the collaborators that they need to be, that we need to be for our students, that's where the magic happens. And so that was kind of a brief journey from classroom to counseling to professional learning, eventually to Title One programs and so forth.
hmm, I appreciate that. I really do. And just understanding that you were already thinking about the mind, body, and spirit connection in the work and in the journey. And so I know for me, my parents have been my first teachers in regards to education. My mom worked in as a substitute teacher, parent. She was a parent educator as well. And lo and behold, I also learned down the line that she was a very big advocate of the Black Panther movement and just really
Mm,
thinking about Black liberation, Black joy. My dad, a truck driver, but my dad always like you could learn so much about the stories he told, and so there was so much texture, so many different layers to the stories he told, that I saw how important it was that we tell good stories, because I at our table we always had a variety of people who came, people from
Mhm.
all walks of life, different political affiliations and different beliefs, different economic situations. My household at times could be very much lower middle class to middle class, depending on when the check arrived, in the bank
Right.
account. But one of the things that I hold dear is, what I've learned from both of my parents is the power of that human condition and connection. They did it over a kitchen table. They did it where folks just came by and they felt comfortable talking about some of the toughest things they faced, and I feel
Mhm.
like I too was gifted with that, and that I think that's something we share alignment with. For you, as you look at where you are today, and you look back at just the origins of really centering on the human condition, really centering on the potential in us, right? I am
Mhm.
curious about, was there a moment, was there an experience that really solidified, was the foundation for you saying, all right, I really do want to serve as a school counselor. I really do. Because I mean, the journey was psychology, but you said, hey, I really want to go into this. So could you share a little bit more about like what held, what caused you to decide to take this on as your one of your careers?
Mhm. Um, there is a book called Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi. And in that book, Keith describes what he calls the blue flame, where your talent intersects with your passion. And I just remember, one of my first years of teaching, I remember doing this little assessment where you wrote down all of the things that you felt like you were good at and all of the things that you were passionate about, like things that you could do without getting paid for the rest of your life. And I remember all of these things like writing and traveling and listening to people and connecting. And as I went through that inventory, I thought about, well, what are some jobs, or what are some roles, or where does this intersect with where I would like to go with, and what services I would like to be to the community. And counseling and like therapy was a strong kind of intersection that surfaced for me.
Mhm.
And I just remember um, thinking just how influential, like when I was in high school, um, my one of my helpful living teachers was also, he was my soccer coach.
Mhm.
And another one of my coaches was also my school counselor. And I just remember, and he was a male, and I just remember not seeing many like men. There were several men along the way in education that
Yeah.
influenced me in very positive ways. And I just remember seeing myself in that individual and in that role. And I ended up coaching soccer for a small stint too. But
Mm.
just trying to stay on track with the answer, I think the universe leaves you these breadcrumbs of um, where you're supposed to be when we pay attention to those, and when we're reflective and think back to, like, keeping it on me, when I
Mhm.
was slowing down enough to be reflective and think through, well, where do I see myself having the most influence, where do I see my calling taking the most root. I think it was just school counseling and listening. And I just remember, like, reflecting back to when I was um, well, that's a whole nother story. I won't go down. I won't go down that path. But I think just again, listening to the clues and being in tune with the things that you're most passionate about, the things that you are interested in and talented in. I just always knew that I was bound for a service profession. Um, and just school counseling happened to be just the intersection. When I think back to the school counselors in my life that um, helped me see possibilities, that poured into me, even when sometimes my teachers may have not been, I just knew that that role of school counseling was influential. And I knew it wasn't a forever thing, but I knew that's where my early years in education would be.
Mhm. Mhm. Never eat alone, the blue flame. So it's, I guess this is based on what you shared. It's like when you when you actually are working in passion, and you are, I guess, rising above the things we look at the mirror and we might feel like these are our insecurities, these are the challenges, but we arriving like, I think this is what I believe I'm destined to do, right?
Hmm.
And I think that sounds like that's part of it. I vaguely, remember just a couple of clips from Keith's book, and I'll make sure it's in the show notes. I
Okay.
am curious for you, as you look at, you come from North Carolina, baby, and so I'm just curious. Like, North Carolina has a lot of rich history. Um, and you're a part of the heartbed of that. And so I'm curious about North Carolina, leading, existing, thriving, building an incredible family and a career there. What has the landscape in North Carolina, culturally, spiritually, professionally, taught you about belonging as well as becoming?
Hmm. Um, Being the South, I was born in Virginia, which is just
Mhm,
right across the border. Virginia and North Carolina are similar in a lot of ways. So it
mhm,
always felt like home for me moving to North Carolina. I moved here and I mean, it feels like lifetimes ago now in 2004, but Virginia and North Carolina are the only states that I've lived in.
okay.
I think it felt very similar to home for me. It had a home feel where um, the people were courteous. I wasn't far, closer than just a phone call to family, like right across the border. And I
Okay.
think when I moved here, um, as you were mentioning when we were jumping on, just how like Southern hospitality
Mhm,
and how people just really take to you, and the neighborhood that we live in now, the cul-de-sac that we're in, it is a very racially and culturally diverse
mhm,
cul-de-sac, and so it feels like home. We text each other. Our children go door to door without having to think of where they are, what's going on, and I know that is a privilege that we are afforded being in the space that we're in.
mhm,
Um, but it just says it has felt like home, um, in the sense of just being a welcoming and warm community. And I think it also goes back to kind of knowing yourself and what you need as well. It's like
mhm,
when I moved here, I already had a sense of self and what I needed in my friends and my community. And
mhm,
so it helped me naturally gravitate towards like places and spaces that were affirming, um, spaces that I knew to be safe. And that just helped me feel even more at home, And so I think, as we think about definitely even being in spaces where you may be the only one of anything or one with certain experiences that others may not have, I think is really about knowing yourself,
mhm.
what you need, and being able to um, find your people and stay connected to the people who energize you, who recharge you, and just affirm who you are and where you're going.
Mhm. Yeah. One of the things that I have curiosities about, especially with North Carolina, and just thinking about the conversations that we're having nationally at this time, but also
Mhm.
locally around difference and belonging, and just knowing that, depending on where you are, um, what systems you're in, um,
Mhm.
you know, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging are huge buzzwords. They can be triggers for folks. Some places are redlining, those words
Right.
in real interesting
Yes.
ways. But I know that you have and continue to do incredible work on the human condition, regardless of difference. And you really call folks in to how they think, how they connect, the ways that organizations are thinking about creating cultures of belonging,
Mhm.
within, where they are. And so I'm curious, how has the work shifted for you, based on some of the context and on places that you're in?
Yeah, absolutely. I think. And you mentioned this earlier in the intro. I have worked primarily in healthcare for the last 2 years as a um, diversity inclusion specialist for one of our large healthcare systems here in North Carolina.
Mhm.
And, as you were saying, like there has been a huge shift in support of the work,
Mhm.
in how people receive even the words diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think one of the things that is very true of my work is still disrupting the predictability by zip code. So whether it's education, whether it's healthcare or other systems or industries, there's so much predictability based on where you live. You mentioned redlining, right? And
Mhm.
so I think just moving in the space of um, by zip code, we can almost predict what student outcomes may look like.
Mhm.
In healthcare, by zip code, we can tell what life expectancy might be. And so, how do we, I think, just keeping that in the forefront, how do we disrupt that predictability? Whatever we might be calling the work, like knowing that it is still the right work and is still the mindsets, whether we're shifting mindsets for educators who are working with students, whether we're helping shape the mindsets of nurses or physicians who are working and treating like patients and families. It all just starts with, who are you? What are your guiding principles? And just raising consciousness around the systems and how that predictability is embedded in these systems. So, like one of the programs that I help lead in our healthcare system is our health equity scholars work, and it's called Beyond Our Walls.
Mhm.
And in that program, we look at race, we look at income, historical origins of race, income, environment, and how they shape present day health outcomes. And um, it's all rooted in data.
Mhm.
Um, it's all empirical data, and that helps people understand and see that it's not just something that we feel or people sharing experiences from their perspective, which is valuable. But
Mhm.
as much as we can keep things rooted in empirical data, when it comes to the work, going back to your question of how do we navigate present day opposition to diversity and inclusion work, it's the foundational component that diversity enriches, period. A room is always full of diverse perspectives, backgrounds, whether that be racial, whether that be ethnic or cultural, whether that's the zip code you grew in, region of the country you grew up in, whether that's your role. Um, One guiding principle for me has always been that everyone has something valuable to contribute, even sometimes when we don't see eye to eye or recognize um, or don't agree with certain perspectives. There is still something powerful that can come from having a conversation, um, hearing someone out, and being able to offer your perspective and help raise consciousness for them.
Mhm. I would love if you would just elaborate a little bit more. Something you said, and I wrote down with the program Beyond Our Walls, and it may or may not actually be part of this program. But you said you work to disrupt. Um, I and I might be leaning in a little too much here, but disrupting whether or not it's access, whether or not it's mindset, when it comes down to how people perceive the or deliver or serve people in particular zip codes. And I'm
Mhm.
making the leap here that certain zip codes may or may not have access to. There may be a difference in regards to the type of quality of care or access to care by zip codes. And I would love for you to just share a little bit more about like what does that work look like on the ground level. How does a mom, a grandmother, an uncle,
Mhm.
a working father, um how might they be thinking about this, and how does this touch them depending on where they are?
Yes. So there's a long standing, just particularly from the African American community, or Black community in America, there is a history of um, not not feeling that we can trust the
Mhm.
government, not feeling that we can trust the powers that be when it comes to healthcare and medicine, um, and that mistrust has been documented over a long period in our history, and So when we think about what this looks like on the ground, it looks like what we call targeted universalism, in
Hmm.
a sense of, when we think about equity and equality,
Yeah.
it's like interventions we might provide in a classroom or in a school for
Mhm.
certain populations who may need something different than the mainstream or what we normally provide.
Mhm.
It's tier two. It's one, it's core, it's foundational, um, core one or tier one instruction, but then it's also tier two. So when we think about what this looks like on the ground,
Mhm.
it is not just providing a blanket service to everyone within our vicinity of the healthcare system or the hospital. It
Mhm.
is looking at particular nodes or zip codes around where we are and thinking, what does this group specifically need? It's not just about, and targeted universalism, I continue to use that term, it's not about like raising the tide for everyone.
Mhm.
It's about closing the gap that that is between certain groups and certain populations. And
Mhm.
so if an area of what that might look like on the ground is if we need a mobile primary care unit that comes to a certain zip code or a certain street or a certain intersection on Tuesdays, on Thursdays, and Saturdays, but maybe not in another neighborhood or a bordering neighborhood, then that's what we'll do. Um, it also looks like, as you know, like representation matters. It looks like having staff members and people that are employed in your organization who
Mhm.
look like and who patients and families in the community see themselves represented in the staff that is coming to meet their needs or offer information or help provide access. And
Yeah.
so it looks like doing things that are specific to, it's culturally responsive to the needs of the community and of the zip code. So it's not just one broad brush or one stroke that we say, well, this is what we're doing for everyone. It's meeting people where they are.
Yeah. I appreciate that. As I think about my parents who are they're relying upon like Medicare. They're relying upon what their state, the city, the town offers. I was recently, and I say that to say, we're in an interesting time where I don't think that we've ever imagined that nationally we have millions of people who are relying upon care, and now it's requiring states to actually think differently about how do you, even if federally, there are cuts, there are um, shifts in policy, there's erasure of data sets that could be critical and crucial to particular populations of people, who doctors and funders and foundations are leaning, and they're heavily relying upon this data in order to substantiate why one zip code may need more care than other, or scientists who are studying the effects of where power stations are next to schools or
Yeah.
home, or you thinking about lead levels, and we think like, oh, we're so beyond that at this point, but I'm like, uh just here in Boston, they finally started to de-lead most of the schools in the last 10 years. So it's like
Mm,
this has been going on and very pervasive, especially in Black and brown communities and marginalized communities for decades and possibly more. I'm curious for you, as you look at what is specifically happening in, whether or not it's North Carolina, even particular regions, have there been some wins for you that you're saying like, okay, I know that I have arrived at the right time. This thing, this program, this initiative, this campaign, I can say here's the story of how I know that I am where I'm supposed to be because these people actually got their needs better met, or someone's life was saved because something you decided to do, something you dared bravely on.
yeah, I think I guess most recently, when thinking about, I guess, my work in healthcare, and I can certainly give examples of this in education as well. I think most recently, just the program that I'm helping lead with is work in the community beyond our walls. I think one of the like biggest ahas for me that I was in the right space at the right time and making a difference. Um, it was like this the work that we're leading leads up to um, quality improvement. And so these are strategies um, that that's embedded in quality improvement work that participants in the program are taking back to their respective departments with their role, with their leadership in the community, with patients that they're serving. And it's a new kind of lens or new set of, um, we would say, lens that they are using to shape their care, to shape compassion for all. And some of the stories that we have heard from people who have participated
Mhm.
have really just have let us know that we're doing the right work at the right time, given the current climate of our nation. You know, uh, people who have entered the program skeptically, and sometimes when people sign up for things, even though it's not mandatory, sometimes people enter things, particularly where we know we're going to have conversations around race, where we're going to have conversations around structural racism. Um, People enter it sometimes waiting to poke holes in it or to be the opposition. And I think the overwhelming amount of people who have gone through and have been able to say that they really could see where the work was coming from, um, how they have been operating in a way that has sustained the system
Mhm.
as it stood. Um, the feedback that we've gotten, and we're still looking at people reporting just how much of a difference these new lenses and this new shift is making. But and I think moving beyond, um, unconscious bias, that is another course or work that I lead within our system. But when we think about not just shifting mindsets to help people know where they may be having some unconscious bias or raising their biases from the unconscious to conscious. The work really happens in systemic work. Like the work happens when we disrupt the system, when we change the system, when we put new things in place that make so much more of a difference than what the results that we have been getting.
Mhm. For those who are listening today, and whether or not it is in healthcare, might be in education spaces, could be in faith spaces, for you, what have you felt like has been a lesson learned or an insight or something you hold on to when it comes down to disruption or being brave in any of those spaces, that if no one hears anything else you said today, but they can hold on to this piece for themselves, what would that be?
Uh, it's several lessons that I've learned over the last few years. I think something that initially stands out for me um, is just courage comes to mind. And when we think about um, being a leader of, um, diversity and inclusion work or leading work that centers belonging and humanity, um, courage, the what I would share is that courage can sometimes be bold and loud, and sometimes courage is um, quiet yet strong. And
Mhm.
so it's one of those things that um, when leading this work, when doing things that have such an impact on a system,
Mhm.
sometimes it's not always about being out front and the loudest. Sometimes it is about being in the background, elevating voices that may be traditionally marginalized other than your own, and being an ally. That
Mhm.
all of that work is needed, and all of us fill in and step in at different times in different ways.
Yeah. One of the things that I try to hold on to a great deal is from the great Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who talks about like the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in the moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at the times of challenge and controversy. And we're
Yes.
we're in some very interesting times. Um, when I think about where we are in this stage, um, we're actually it's June right now when this recording is happening. We're in Black Men's Health Month. And you know, one of the ways I know I get a dose of just cheer and joy is looking at the videos that you post on social media. So for folks who will hear this podcast, and make sure it's all tagged in the show notes for you, you have I love the storytelling that you do. You'll do it from a car. You'll be walking. You'll pause. You'll be like, "Look, I stopped on the side of the road because somebody one of the podcast one of the videos you did that in the last week or so was you stopped on the side of the road. You were driving, and there was someone who was driving behind you, and it was very
Right.
frustrating for you that this person was tailgating you, and they just kept tailgating you, and they kept tailgating you, and um you found yourself speeding up a little bit more, and they were speeding up a little bit more until the point that you had an actualization, or maybe at some point that person was able to move beyond you. But what you said that stood with me is that, well, what I took from it, that might not have been the message you wanted, but this is the message I took, that we need to move at the speed of our own light, and sometimes trying to run someone else's race,
Yeah.
or to find ourselves so charged by someone else's journey, or that people are frustrated, and we are also, you know we're acting off of that energy.
Hmm.
And I appreciated the fact that you just gave us a moment to pause and recollect ourselves as you talked about a little bit more of your own actualization of like what was happening in that phenomenon. I'm curious what made you decide that you wanted to start sharing these small, moments with folks in the social media world.
Uh, I think for me, it was um, discovering my voice
Mhm.
and recognizing that, even if the story you share or your message or whatever it is that you post um, or the whatever work you might be engaging in, if it at least impacts one person,
Mhm.
then it's worth it for me. And so I think it, moving into a space of like social media and sharing, like I saw at the time years ago, I saw where like storytelling and sharing videos and podcasts were really taking off. And I've always wanted to, um, share stories and pitfalls and mistakes and lessons in a way that inspires and supports people. And so I feel like social media, it's so much like foolishness out there.
Mhm.
It's so much that people are sharing that is like counter to probably what should be shared. And that people can use social media for ways that can be harmful or negative. And so why not use it in a positive way to share messages that inspire? And I think it just goes back to my personal mission also, which is to support and inspire people and teams to do and be their best. And so I've always found that when I'm living my mission, I can do that in several ways. I can do that in any industry. I can do that in any country. I can do that, personally, professionally. But when I'm living my mission and being true to myself, how you can do that is in multiple ways. But I just found storytelling and sharing and posting on social media was a way to just spread love and light in a positive way.
Yeah. And I know that one of the videos you did was like you were featuring a conversation with your from your son. And I am curious, like how are your kids receiving you know them them sometimes finding themselves in some of the stories that you're sharing.
Yeah, our son Julian is I always say that like he's one of my three favorite teachers. Even though he's not certified, he teaches me something new every day, right? Um, and he thinks it's pretty cool
Mhm.
when I share stories about him or when I share a picture of him.
Mhm.
And I mean, he's only 8, but he's also already expressed the interest of wanting to start a YouTube channel on his own. But that's the new generation.
Okay.
And yeah, he really appreciates it. And um, I think it's just I think it's in my DNA. I remember again I shared about my parents earlier, and I know my father as a minister from the pulpit, he would share stories about me and my sister all the time, and I always just felt not that he was centering me, but centering an inspirational message, like centering lessons learned and positivity and hopefulness, and so it just comes natural to share stories about things that are most important to me.
Mm. What is it that you are hoping people will speak to as part of your legacy? What do you? Yeah, I'm curious. Like, there's so many different facets to who you are, how you show up in the space. But I'm curious what you are hoping that people will hold on to, if nothing else.
I think, it goes back to, I remember my father shared with me at a very young age. He said, your manners in life will take you further than anything else, further than education,
Mhm.
um, further than anything. And um, I've always held that advice close to my heart. And I think if there's anything that I want people to remember about me or to share about me and a legacy is, that I was kind, that I was helpful, that I was love, that I was joy, that I was all the positive things that you might share about someone. Again, of course, no one is perfect, but I think for the most part, it's not so much about degrees or accolades or um, not even measurement and results, but just that people felt inspired by me, that people felt like they were better around me, um, and that I offered something, some type of light or some type of love that helped them at a time when they needed it.
Mm, it's powerful. Well, before we let you go, there's a legacy that might be on the line based on this game I call Brave or Nah. It's just a game to just see just how bold you really are when things get real, random, or possibly ridiculous. Uh, I'm just curious how you might respond to a few of these questions. Okay.
All right, all right.
All right. So, who are you cheering for with your full chest? UNC or Duke?
Oh, is do I have other options, or it has to be one of those two?
Well, I answer however you feel.
Look, when I moved here, so I am a Hokie. When I got my master's from Virginia Tech
Okay.
before I moved here, and so when most people ask me that question, Duke,
Hmm.
UNC, NC State, ECU, I often say neither. I
Mm.
say Virginia Tech. So
O-
that's my answer to that.
Okay, Virginia Tech.
If I
So,
had to choose between Carolina or Duke, I would say Carolina.
hmm, why is that?
I, how much time do we have? I think my high school colors were like the Carolina colors. So a lot of people, we would often wear like Carolina blue because it was my high school's colors years ago. So that's one of the reasons that I probably have a little more allegiance to. If I had to choose between the two, I would say Carolina, and maybe Michael Jordan. Again, Michael Jordan being a alumni. So
Mm,
anyway, that's who I would choose.
okay. Let's shift to barbecue a little bit. Uh-huh. So I'm curious whether or not you are dry rub, vinegar based, um, or something else in regards to like good barbecue.
I would say I would say dry rub, and the reason I would say dry rub is
Mhm.
because again, dry rub, if it's cooked right, it is it's not dry, it's moist, it's
Mhm.
perfect, and you can add sauce to it. You can add some vinegar base to it. It's like the vinegar base is already in there, so you can't really separate it. So if I
Mhm.
had to choose, I would say dry rub.
Really? Okay. And if you doing a sauce, is it tomato based or is it vinegar based or a little bit of both? Like what?
I'd say vinegar base. If I had to go with the sauce, choose a
Okay.
sauce, vinegar base. Yeah.
I, I like dry rub as well. I like
Okay.
brisket is my thing. I love
Yes.
brisket. all day. So I when I come down, I'm like I need recommendations or look, if that's what y'all do, I'm coming sit at the truck. I'll come sit outside. Like let's go. All right. Let's see. I got a couple more good questions here. So, uh, would you ever participate in a dad and kid obstacle race at field day and go all
Oh,
out?
yes, I would. I would. I would participate. I have not yet. I haven't. I've been a chaperone at field day, but I haven't participated, but I would.
Mm, okay. How many times have you seen Kung Fu Panda?
At least four. At least four. And which one? Kung Fu Panda one, two, three. Like, what
Mhm.
are we talking? I've seen all of them numerous
Really?
times.
What
Yeah.
is the movie that is on repeat for y'all at the house?
Oh,
Like a family favorite.
family favorite. Um, right now it's the Minecraft movie. We ended up buying it. I mean, we
Okay.
saw it in the theater, but yeah, I would say the Minecraft movie. Like before that, now it was my choice, not
Mhm.
my son's, but it was on repeat because I was like, "You're gonna sit down and you're gonna learn this movie." It was The Wiz. The Wiz was on repeat like
Okay.
all day, every day. Not by his choice, but he loves it now. He loves
Mhm. It's like it is something every child should have access to, and
it. Yes,
they should sing all the songs and enjoy it. It's a
yes.
great time. Was that inspired because of Wicked?
Look, no, it was before, and we ended up buying Wicked too, so we're
Okay.
ready for part two to come out.
Okay.
Um, but the original, I can't remember. I think it's just I think he ended up seeing The Wizard of Oz,
Mhm.
and at that point, I said, "Well, you need to know The Wiz also. We can't let you grow up without knowing both worlds, both stories." And now, look, and that's perfect because Wicked. Now, again, we're anticipating part two, but
Yeah.
now he's got the whole concept, all three.
Okay. Love that. Love that. Well, Phil,
Yeah.
how would folks stay connected to you if they're inspired by something they heard today and they just need you in their ecosystem? How would they go about that?
Look, the easiest way I said I've cornered the market on Phil Eccles. Like there are a few Phil Eccles, but most cases, if you go to any social media platform and
Mhm.
you put in Phil Eccles, you'll find me there. So
Mhm.
TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, but PhilEccles.com is also an easy way to find me. Again, Phil Eccles, YouTube. So Phil Eccles is just kind of the easiest way, but PhilEccles.com is a way that you can find me and all the things that I'm connected to.
Nice. And we will make sure we put that in the show notes, folks. Well, Phil, I really appreciate you eking out time from family to join the Brave Voices and Ed family. Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Craig. And as I said earlier, you've always been someone that I have just admired your voice, your passion, your unapologetic leadership. And I appreciate this opportunity to be on and share. And again, we may not talk very often, but just know
Mhm.
that I'm always supportive and cheering you on here from North Carolina. So thank you.
Look, I know it, I feel it, and I appreciate you too, man. Nothing but love.
Nothing but love.
All right, family. This is a wrap for this episode of Brave Voices in Education. If something spurred in you today, please don't keep it to yourself. Share it with your village, your team, your brave ones. Come be a part of this movement at bravevoicespod.com, where healing meets hustle and testimony turns into transformation. This podcast actually is more than just a show. It's a Fuel for the Black Boy Joy Summit, a celebration of brilliance, belonging, and Black boyhood, Black and brown boyhood that refuses to shrink. Like what you heard? Like, subscribe, and follow us on your favorite platform. Leave a review and share it with your circle. Because every listen, every share, every shout out helps build classrooms, communities, and futures that are braver and more beautiful than before. Until next time, generate your own joy. Never go it alone. Get free and always love your brave. Y'all take care. Ah.